The old English saying is, one man's junk is another man's treasure. And I have to confess to being rather a treasure collector myself. So I picked this knife up for $6 at a local flea market. I'm going to do a little bit of restoration work in it and make an improvised sheath. So this was probably a chef's knife or possibly a butcher's knife from the 70s or 60s, okay? The reason I say that is because it's marked. The previous owner has put a mark on it, so we have an X with a line like that. And if you've ever worked in an industrial kitchen, you know one of the first things you've got to do is stamp your knives, okay, because they tend to go walkabout pretty fast. So we have a carbon steel blade, we have no maker's mark, wooden handle which is sort of a 3/4 style tang, okay, 3 brass rivets. Handle could be in a little bit better condition. We have a bit of cracking here, but you know it's stable enough at the moment. I really don't want to completely rehandle it. I just want to do a little bit of lightweight restoration. But the blade edge is in really good shape. Okay, so it's going to sharpen up nicely. There's no nicks and there's no aggressive over sharpening. One of the problems with these older style knives is you will just get people will just hack at it with, you know, angle grinders and whatever, and produce sort of quite a raggedy edge. This one's been quite badly sharpened in the past, which is a shame because it's a Heiko brand from Zollege in Germany. So originally this would have probably been a slightly better quality knife than the one that I'm going to do some work on. But I'm just going to start with sharpening and we'll just see how sharp we can get it, and then it's probably going to be part of my more traditional equipment that I'll use with a swag or a canvas pack. So this sharpening stone is 100 years old, okay, and this knife costs $6. So you see I've taken a little bit of steel off, not too much, but we'll just give it the old paper test. Okay, that's not too bad at all. For a $6 knife and a 100-year-old sharpening stone. Okay, so we have a little bit of tearing there. Okay, so it's got a workable edge on it. We just need to fine it a little bit and just get rid of the burr a little bit. Okay, I'll probably just strop it a little bit now and leave it at that. Then I'll probably just do a little bit of work on the handle and the sheath. So as you can tell, it's coming along rather nicely. It's quite a difference, and I've probably just about finished working on the actual knife, and it's time to kind of like start thinking about a case or a sheath, because I want to use this as a little bit more as a kind of outdoor knife, a bush knife, rather than a kind of a house knife. Okay, to use in the house it's fine now, it's sharp, and I've done a little bit of work on the handle. Okay, so just to look at the handle, I've sanded it back and I've added linseed oil. I probably could go further and do a little bit more detailing here and stuff like that. I could go completely crazy and rehandle the whole thing, but this is very much a working knife and a tool to use. So taking it back to 250 grit, yeah, that's fine. That's a good sort of working handle type thing. The main reason I wanted to sand back the handle was just the ergonomics were wrong with this handle. I like the blade, and but the handle, if you noticed, it was kind of angular like this one. Okay, so it's kind of square shaped handle, which some of these older vintage style knives, some of the kind of cheaper ones, I've noticed that's how they did it. I don't know whether that was just an economy measure at the time, and certainly this was a relatively budget knife at the time. I mean, again, if we look at the quality of the wood there, we have a knot there. Okay, so it's not the best quality timber. It looks like beech, which would certainly suggest European manufacture. but it's hard to tell. It's quite similar to beechwood on some of my Optinel knives, but it's hard to make 100% identification. You can certainly tell it could be a better quality handle, but it's perfectly fine for what I want. Okay, so I've been adding a few layers of linseed oil on this. Okay, when I use linseed oil, I tend to use raw linseed oil rather than boiled. Okay, stuff's relatively cheap. It's about $10 a bottle. Raw linseed is superior in my estimation, because although it takes longer to dry, it doesn't really contain so many nasty chemicals and solvents than boiled linseed oil. As I understand it, boiled linseed oil isn't really boiled anymore. Okay, the boiling was to make it dry faster, and for whatever reason the manufacturers don't do that anymore. They just add these sort of drying agents. Okay, and they just add these unnecessary chemicals to it. So I just don't think it's a good idea. So I just use the natural raw linseed oil. Okay, and it just takes a little bit longer to dry, but that's fine. You just got it up the shed for a couple of days and just come up and give it a few coats of linseed oil. One thing with linseed oil is you do have to be careful of the rags, because once the rags have been impregnated with the oil, there's a potential that they can spontaneously combust. So you should always dispose of these very, very carefully. The ideal thing is to burn them after you've used them. Okay, so treat these as a fire hazard once you've used them with linseed oil. That's the only thing to worry about. My preference is to go for raw, like I say. Okay, so again, I mean, it's quite a nice wooden handle. Okay, obviously a lot of character. I mean, you could have gone further with the detailing, but I'm happy with it as it is. And the blade itself, so as you can see, I freehand sharpened it, and it's come up pretty good. It's responded quite well to sharpening, but I've cleaned the blade, and if you noticed, it had a lot of patina on there and a lot of surface rust. It wasn't that bad, but the product I use is Garflex, and this is an abrasive block, and this just works really well for these kind of projects, and I highly recommend it. It's not particularly expensive. You get it off eBay and stuff like that. It does a better job than sort of the wet and dry sandpaper that a lot of people use, simply because it doesn't really scratch the surface of the metal. It just removes the sort of rust. Really good for stainless steel knives, if you ever get a little bit of rust on a stainless steel knife. So this is pretty much good to go to use in the home or use in the house. But obviously I want to use this, like I say, as a little bit more of an outdoor knife and as a bush knife, as kind of part of my more traditional kit, right? And it's a more traditional knife, so it suits that quite well. So I could make a really nice leather sheath for this, but I'm going to wing it and I'm going to improvise. And I'm going to use this. Okay, so this is an ammunition pouch from the Second World War. These are relatively common and relatively inexpensive. I found this one in a skip. And what I'm intending to do is take the gusset of the ammunition pouch, okay, this one's from 1942, and repurpose it into sort of a sheath or a case, okay, which will be a little bit like a kind of like how they do machete sheaths and stuff like that. Okay, and then also I've got a whole heap of recycled materials, thread and rivets and this kind of stuff, and this all came from the side of the road, and it was obviously belonged to a cobbler or a leather crafter. Okay, so I'm just going to work on that and make a case for it so it can be carried safely, just using these kind of materials that essentially have cost nothing. Alright, that was a quick demonstration just in a tree that downed naturally. It's a local tree called Castlevania coming hand honest, right? Again, it came down naturally, so it's just a demonstration on limbing, alright. But the kind of gear that I'm rocking today, pretty old school. Got a Trapper Nelson pack from sometime mid 20th century, about 80 years old. Second World War canteen, and this style of knife is very much what would have been used as a bush knife back in the day, right? You know, people didn't have the luxury of things like you know, Bark River and Falkneven and stuff like that. This is what we had, you know, back in the day. That being said, it's pretty effective. It's not so great at cross cutting. This kind of stuff where you kind of just want to do limbing. If you get a nice flick on it, it's pretty effective, and you've got nice clean cuts, and you can be pretty effective with it. If you start to cross cut, it's not so effective. You really want a saw to supplement it, right? But for a knife that was, I mean, what this is designed to do, okay, is cut steaks, right? Cut tenderloins, Chateaubriand, cut them that way, 200 grams. That is what it's designed to do, right? It is not designed to be taken out in the bush, you know, and used to make shelters and that kind of stuff, right? So for, you know, something that's really designed for a butcher or a chef to use, it does an incredibly versatile tool, okay? What can I say? I just really like this knife. It's really cool. Just really quickly, because I know some of you guys are really into kind of bush cuisine and bush cooking. A little bit of bread toasted on the coals. This is a type of German sausage, a pork sausage. Okay, it's just boiled. This is cabbage. This is braised cabbage. I've added a little bit of cinnamon in there, a little bit of salt, a little bit of brown sugar. Just braised that off lightly. Very good for you. Very high in vitamin C, right? And this whole rig, like this is a German mess kit, which is a really useful little bit of kit. I got this off a mate called Duncan Kerr. He's a really great chap, alright. German sausage, cabbage, German mess kit. You guys work it out where I was going with that one, alright. But if we look at the knife, I'll show you the sheath that I've made from the improvised materials I had, which was this ammunition pouch, Second World War, Australian Army ammunition pouch, right? So the two things with any knife sheath is safety, and then probably safety, right? So it doesn't really matter what it looks like, and it doesn't really matter what material it's made from, whether it's leather, kydex, canvas. It has to be safe, right? So the two things we look for in any sheath, and this is any sheath I make from leather, I will do this. You know, can we push it out here, right? Well, we can, right? So we've got sewing, conventional sewing, but I've actually put rivets in there, and I've made the rivets just from little bits of wire. All right, maybe rivets the wrong word. So we've got little bits of wire there, so it's very hard for the blade to pop out the end there, right? It would take considerable force, right? Simply falling over in the bush and the scrub wouldn't do that, right? And obviously we need retention, right? So you can see with this style of sheath, it's a little bit like a hunter style sheath that you would get in a K-bar or something like that, where we have a snap here, and most of the retention of the knife is in the snap, all right? So, you know, it just needs to hold its position. Okay, all right, and it's just going to stay there. So you need to be able to do that basically. Okay, so this snap is just recycled off the top, the lid of the ammunition pouch. As you can see, a little brass thing. I have noticed the fabric actually over time is stretching, so for long-term storage I'll leave it like that, but as it is, it's fine. I think for just, you know, improvising with what you've got, that's a pretty good project, and that's how they did it back in the day, right? And this knife, now it's pretty useful for food prep, cutting cordage, you know, that kind of stuff. Obviously its downside, it's not really a woodworking knife, you know, it's not really a chopper. Alright, it does have its limitations, but again, for $6 and then as an exercise and improvisation, I think that's a pretty good result. Okay, lunchtime for me.